Hello, and welcome to Insurrection with Brenton Lengel. I'm your host, Brenton Lengel, playwright, poet, Ringo-nominated comic creator, and sometimes debate bro. And I am joined with Ben Burgis. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience on the off chance someone just stumbled in here?
Sure. Yeah, I am a philosophy instructor at Rubiner College and a columnist for Jacobin. And I'm the host of the Give Them an Argument podcast and YouTube channel.
Excellent. Yeah. And Ben, we were just talking before we came out here, but we just found out that we are COVID shot twins because we both got our first COVID shot yesterday.
Yeah. And actually triplets, because I know my I sent a St. Patrick's Day, text to Adam Proctor, host of the Dead Pundit Society last night, and he wrote back and said that he was staying sober because he just got his COVID shot that day. Of course, I got my COVID shot, but probably stupidly, I still, when I was done with the debate, still hit the Jameson and spent a few hours listen to Flogging Molly and whatnot, so.
Me too. I think I sent you a Flogging Molly song and you were just like, oh yeah, I'm already listening to them. They're phenomenal. And interestingly enough, Dave King, the lead singer, a lot of his lyrics were some of the first, because when I first started listening to Flogging Molly, I was nominally on the right because I was listening to them in like high school. And Dave King's lyrics and a lot of the songs were one of the first things that kind of got me to start questioning capitalism and stuff. So I think people underestimate how effective anti-capitalist art can be.
Yeah, they're I guess that stuff is peppered in. It's like the Black Friday rule. There ain't no jobs in your free state.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there's that. There's some great stuff in. There's a bunch of anti-Iraq war stuff. There's a phenomenal song called Oliver Boy, which is about the situation in Gaza and Palestine. Because there's the whole connection between the Irish and other colonized peoples throughout the rest of the world, which ironically Oliver Boy points out exactly by making reference to Oliver Cromwell. So, but speaking of, colonized people all over the world, you just had an incredible debate with the son of Milton Friedman. That's David D. Friedman.
Yeah. Yep. So, last night, it ended up coming together pretty quickly at the, at the end. But fortunately, they, haven't had didn't have any side effects from the vaccine yesterday.
No side effects except you get excellent 5G reception now.
Yeah.
And a weird compulsion to buy Microsoft products.
Yeah, they slide in that Bill Gates microchip, so like it's so tiny you don't even feel it. So I wasn't loopy or anything, for the debate. And it was an interesting one. I felt good about it in a lot of ways. It was definitely, oddly enough, right? I wasn't really expecting this. I think the like open discussion parts were a lot more boisterous than really any of these that I've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I will. It got hotter than some of your debates, even with like Mr. Reagan, which was really surprising to me because me and American Johnson had debated him. And also Professor Richard Wolff, and he didn't seem to get agitated with either of us. I mean, he was very amicable against me and American Johnson, and it wasn't really until Mike Humer kind of stumbled into the debate late that they really started doing like the ANCAP stuff, which is like, I think, what was it? Mike Humer asked me like, "Are you a murderer?" I'm like, "Not that I'm aware of." Because ANCAP, they love to do that shit. Is this your first time debating an anarcho-capitalist like directly?
No. Let me think about this. I think I've done a few of those. So there's Walter Block, came on my show to argue with me, and and
Dave Smith, right?
Dave Smith, of course, yeah, Dave Smith.
Yeah.
That was the very first one, essentially the first person I ever debated. Like I'd done a couple of things with random people on their YouTube channels or whatever, but like that was the first high profile-ish thing that I did back in 2019, I've definitely gotten better. I was like with the Dave Smith, I was way too professorial about it. It's like sort of like acting, like you can kind of gently lead people into the vicinity of the point, which is like just the worst possible thing to do in that format.
Particularly when it's like a freaking ANCAP who's a comedian. You're not gonna gently lead that guy anywhere. I want to point this, by the way, up. The debate with Wolf was moderated better. Yes, indeed, it was, because I moderated it. That was really fun. But Wolf.
And I guess also, Stefan Molyneux, I guess, is in certain moods and ANCAP, even though it's confusing because he also supports Donald Trump and the border wall, which seem like the least anarchist possible positions. But who knows?
Yep. I mean, Molyneux did there was this whole ANCAP to ANCAP to white nationalist pipeline, and Molyneux unfortunately fell down that. I don't know if it was that he was always there or he just decided that there was a lot of audience. He saw which way the wind was blowing and went with the alt-right, because they tend to be like about half the ANCAPs are closet fascists and go kind of the Christopher Cantwell route, and then the other half I think are very confused mutualists who've just been affected by a lot of political propaganda. I feel like had David D. Friedman not been the actual son of Milton Friedman, like he might have moved in more of the mutualist direction. But obviously, with who his father was, I see him building on that legacy, which
The Molyneux one, by the way, was the one where I was the proudest of the way I managed to close it out. Since I had the last word at the very end. The closing statements. Since I've been really trying to press him on that weird contradiction between the anarcho-capitalism and the immigration stuff. And in his defense of the immigration stuff, like one of his arguments at one point was about brain drain from the third world, and another one was about black people in the United States being more likely to, have the kinds of jobs they would lose to immigrants. And so at the very end of the closing statement, I told him that if he really believes that we can violate libertarian economic principles anytime that would be good for black people or the third world, he and I disagree about way less than I thought we did.
That's a very good slam. Now, I thought you had a really strong opening statement in this debate. Did you do anything differently with it, or did you just feel like there was practice there?
I think a lot of that's practice. It's also that that it was a longer opening statement than there usually are for these things, which was his request. So Friedman apparently expressed the preference to James earlier that he doesn't like to have big periods of open discussion. He prefers to have things be more structured. So he wanted to do those 20-minute opening statements. Mm-hmm. And you can build up a lot more in that, than you can with the usual, 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm glad James did that because, in my opinion, some of the modern day debates get a little sloppy just because they're so eager to spend as much time as possible in the open discussion than in like the more heavily moderated ones. And that one, but again, that was one that we saw sparks start to fly from David Friedman primarily, I think. What do you think that was due to? Do you think it was because you brought up Chile early, or do you think it might have been something else?
That could be it, right? Like, because that was definitely like, that was definitely baity. Like I wasn't, obviously I wasn't going to start yelling at him about his dad or anything, but but I did kind of want to put that out there and see how he'd take it, which was because it is such a notoriously terrible part of his father's legacy. Is the fact that he went down to Chile and gave economic advice to the fascist dictator there, Augusto Pinochet. Mm-hmm. And the way people defend him about this, it's like, oh, whatever, he was like an hour of economic advice or something. But like, you could also read the letter that he wrote to Pinochet when he got back. It's like, oh, thank you for your hospitality. It's great that Chile's heading in this better direction, whatever. So, I mean, I didn't actually say anything actually about his dad. But since he does seem in so many ways to continue his parents' political legacy, I was curious to see if he'd respond to that at all. So I just sort of stuck that in as my example of legitimate use of violence. That of course the people of Chile would have had every right to violently resist this military coup in 1973, and kind of left the that your family supported like out of it. So just he could take that or leave it, and he never. As far as I can recall, he never actually referred back to it, but but that could have been part of why he got testy later. I don't know. I
know just what you mean, because he tends to be. First off, I should preface this. I really like Dr. Friedman, on a personal level. I love the fact that he does like Society for Creative Anachronisms and cuts gems and writes fantasy novels and stuff. I think that's super cool. And he's definitely like a guy that I enjoyed speaking to. But at the same time, there's also the competitive debate aspect. And there's also, in my opinion, what are, I guess, bad economics to a certain extent. And I think he's probably the best. Like, if you're doing, there's a reason why I called him the final boss of anarcho-capitalism, because if you're doing ANCAP stuff, his philosophy seems to be the best. But I also noticed that he went in similar directions to a lot of other conversations with ANCAPs that I've had over the years, and I've argued with these people continuously since 2014. So, like, the first thing that I've noticed, and this is where I think you made a mistake, by the way, just throwing out a couple of things. This was in your opening statement. You used a metaphor for the game board.
Yeah.
And you said we need to burn down the game board. And I'm like, Ben, nobody burns down a game board. You switch out the game board. And obviously, like, you wanted that because
nobody can ever play it again.
Yeah. Well,
no, sure. I think I could have just been less dramatic and said we should stop playing that one and
switch out the game board. Yeah, and that sort of plays into ANCAP's hands, because one of their favorite tactics to attack socialists is to insinuate that they are peaceful and tolerant and we are violent and intolerant. And that's why they always talk about how everything needs to be voluntary, and to a large extent a lot of them believe it. But it's also very easy to be it's very easy to say that you're nonviolent and tolerant when capitalism is the mode of production that dominates the world. It's like when you pushed your way to the top in a game of King of the Hill, and then you turn around to all the other kids and go, hey, new rule, no pushing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Which was also an interesting part of it, because even though he's some sort of consequentialist, and which I was actually a little, and there's so much going on, I didn't really circle back. Well, I circled back a couple times, but I didn't during the open discussion, which I guess was probably the time that I'd have the best shot of getting an answer. But he's some kind of consequentialist, although he didn't ever really explain how his type of, he said that he's not a utilitarian, He never explained how his kind is different from utilitarianism, or even really said anything, at least to me, that hinted at it. Like he gave this argument that it's, well, yeah, that you can't, that we can't know, like it was like meta-ethical skepticism, like we can't know the truth about morality, so therefore we should be consequentialist, which was really confusing, because if we can't know what's true about morality, then how could we possibly know that consequentialism is true? But anyway, like, so that, but yeah, I did try to push back against that a little bit, because despite the fact that he's supposedly some kind of consequentialist, he really, really likes to use the word voluntary, which certainly at least is very suggestive of some kind of moral argument for capitalism that's not just, this is going to lead to more welfare.
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% right. Again, it's kind of a cultural thing with anarcho-capitalists. And to a certain extent, I can almost sympathize with the arguments, because a lot of anarcho-capitalism is actually inverted socialist arguments, particularly arguments coming from the anarchist school. And hey, you brought up frickin' Emma Goldman and Nestor Makhno, who's like one of my personal heroes. You quoted a lot from the classical anarchists. And I'm wondering, was that intentional in order to kind of show the division between anarcho-capitalists and not let him claim the libertarian high ground?
Yeah. So, I mean, in context, the immediate thing was that I knew from the Wolf one, he was going to do this. And so I tried to anticipate it in the opening statement, and then he did it anyway. Right. So I wanted to like push back more against it, that he was going to say that historically socialism means state ownership of everything. And if you, if you don't think that socialism means state ownership of everything, you're just, like
ahistorical.
Yeah, you're ahistorical. You're redefining the term. You're like conceding something. You're like whatever. You're giving up on the old style socialist thing. And it just seems like the simplest, most obvious counter to that is, wait a second, but there's this whole wing of the historical socialist movement that didn't want to have a state at all, which, whatever. I mean, it's not even my position, but like clearly, given that, right, like it's just not true that, that historically socialism always meant state ownership of everything, that was just like definitional of socialism, because this is tradition that goes back to the very beginning of the socialist movement, before Marx even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And a lot of people, it's very interesting, the sort of pop culture idea of what socialism is versus the historical one. And one of the reasons why I think it's really important that everyone not just read theory, but read history.
And I should say too, like, and then of course even Marx thought that ultimately in an advanced stage of socialism, you wouldn't have a state, which but I kind of wasn't going to bring that up, because I didn't want to end up getting like caught like arguing about
the state,
arguing about the state, right? Like I just wanted to try to make the point as directly as possible that like clearly this is just not historically true, that socialism has always meant state ownership of everything.
Well, it's very interesting with ANCAPs just in general in debates, because they really like to do this thing where they try to define capitalism in purely negative terms. So they will essentially appeal to, and I don't know if Friedman ever went quite this far, but I've seen it so many times that he may have, and I was just like, oh, right, of course he's making that argument. They'll try to say that essentially any kind of free market is capitalism, and any time the state is not doesn't have force in the marketplace, anytime a state does not come in and regulate a transaction, that's capitalism. And right. It's essentially socialism is when the government does stuff, and capitalism is when the government doesn't do stuff.
Yeah, which is right, which is what I mean. Didn't spend a lot of time on this because it wasn't his official argument. His official argument is consequentialist, but did try to at least briefly make the point that, like, clearly, like, all voluntary means here, right, is that you have, well, actually, it's a weird combination, right? Because one thing, and this is nothing we got into, in the thing itself, but I mean, like, something that I've often, like, tried to press these guys with in the past is that if you really take seriously, like, some kind of libertarian, theory of legitimate, ownership, like, nobody in the real world legitimately owns anything, like, because it's all the chains of ownership are all just going to be hopelessly corrupted, by all of the the history of the last several thousand years of statism, right? And so it's just not like, I mean, my God, like, we're having this conversation, like, we're both the two of us and Dr. Friedman are all located in various places that were conquered from Native Americans, where we're all living in an economy that that was built up with slave labor. Even in Europe, where you don't have quite as dramatic, a backdrop. We've got enclosure and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these things aren't like small details; they're huge parts of the history. So it seems like, taken seriously, like, we just have to be agnostic about whether anybody actually owns anything. But
or perhaps property is theft.
yeah. Which Proudhon, another one of those socialist anarchists, but which
by the way, before I forget, he tried to bring up Lysander Spooner with Spooner's private mail service. You guys really got heated about the mail for a little while.
No, this is something that drives me crazy, that, like, all right wingers believe this, but it's just so weird, right? And they all are so used to telling it to each other that they're, like, surprised whenever anybody pushes back on it, that, like, the post office is, like, really badly run, or which is just baffling to me, that this is a public service that puts post offices in the middle of rural ass nowhere, like where I am right now, that will deliver like a letter from where I am now to my brother in California for 55 cents. Like this is, I mean, like, this should not be your go-to example of, like, some inefficient, public service.
It really wouldn't. They go to that, or they go to the DMV because they know people hate waiting in line. The post office is phenomenal. Like, there's definitely things to get annoyed about with them, but it's incredible. But what's always really interesting is that they cite Lysander Spooner. And Lysander Spooner was a card-carrying member of the IWA. He was in the First International, for crying out loud. Like, he was a socialist through and through. And the thing is that they don't realize this, because a lot of ANCAPs that come to anarcho-capitalism through libertarianism, and a lot of them are like, and I'm not saying David Friedman is, by the way. Let me just preface this, because apparently when I speak generally about something, sometimes people that are tagged take it personally. Destiny. Where they think I'm talking specifically about them. So I'm not talking about David Friedman here. But a lot of ANCAPs come to it through libertarianism, and they come to libertarianism through neo-confederalism. And they, like, they're very much still fighting the Civil War. And they love that Lysander Spooner wrote an article called No Treason, because he basically argued that
the people that the, like, Confederates who come out of the U.S. Army weren't really violating, like, that the sort of oaths they'd taken, whatever, like, this wasn't actually treasonous. What
they always forget, by the way, is that Lysander Spooner was a committed abolitionist who tried to join with John Brown actually tried to break John Brown out of jail was part of a plot to do that. And his plan to free the slaves was literally insurrectionary violence in the South, where they would, quote, and word for word, turn their whips on the masters and free the slaves and fight a guerrilla campaign against the Confederacy. So, like, yeah, not a good person to appeal to for.
And this is the thing. It's not, not David Friedman. We all know where he got his libertarianism, but it's not surprising that a lot of people come to libertarianism from that background. And this goes back to the point we were talking about what you mean by voluntary, right? What property rights are these anyway? Because in practice, they don't, like, even the ones who, unlike Friedman, right, who have these like deontological theories of property rights, that, they don't take them seriously, because in practice, because if they did, they would have to say like the kinds of things that Murray Rothbard was saying, not at the end of his life when he was like a Ron Paul fusionist, but in his New Left period, when he was hanging out with SDS and sort of coming up with libertarian reasons to agree with them, and he wrote this article called "Confiscation and the Homesteading Principle," where he actually embraces a lot of these conclusions, and he says, look, nobody, none of these people really have property rights to this stuff, because it's not like you can trace back like General Motors wealth to some just act of original acquisition or anything like that. And so he says that on the homesteading principle, that one of the ways to just acquisition is that whoever sort of first uses some piece of property gets to claim it. Then it would actually be the workers who are using the factory who would get to claim it as homesteaders. And
I believe that was one of the arguments that was put forth during the Battle of Blair Mountain, actually, was that the workers should own that area because they were the ones that were physically doing the work in the space. And then the government bombed them.
Yeah, right. And the reason that this is important to draw out is like, okay, and how does this relate to the neo-Confederate stuff? Well, it's just, and yeah, I mean, I see Oliver in the chat saying finders keepers, which kind of, I mean, it's kind of why like I never take any of this shit seriously, because I think this is just such a weird theory of like how resources should be distributed in the first place. I mean, I'm like, it always, it's like. It always reminds me of like little kids, like, like, no, I spit on it. It's mine now. Right. I think that the fact that you happen, you're the first person who saw it first, or, was it first or whatever. I don't think has quite moral what these guys do. But if you were going to take it seriously, you'd end up coming to these like radical left conclusions anyway. And then, the reason that this is important is like, okay, well, if that's not in practice what they mean, right? If they're not willing to say, look, none of, it would be any piece of property that you can have like an uncorrupted chain going back to some act of homesteading, unclaimed property with nobody else's rights being violated in the contemporary world is honestly a bit of an aberration. Just because if nothing else, like just who has money to buy what when, it's all corrupted by this stuff. So what do they really mean? And it seems to me that what they really mean in practice is letting people keep whatever legally they have right now under capitalism, except of course the pre-tax version, even though, if legally was really the standard, it would, the IRS.
And that out also, because I don't know if Friedman is a taxationist theft guy, but I would guess he is. And you pointed that out, that, legally speaking during the debate, you can't say taxation is theft if you think people should keep what property is legally theirs.
Yeah, because then the IRS is legally entitled to, a certain chunk of your income. But the point, is that I'm probably being way too circuitous about is just this, that, okay, so if in practice that's what you mean, well, it's a very weird theory, but it does have one great advantage if you're somebody who basically likes the current distribution of wealth between white people and black people in the contemporary United States, which is that you could say, yeah, let's keep that, right? Like, because if you were, really even on libertarian principles taken seriously, like I think there'd be a good case for some form of reparations for the descendants of slaves, but if you're in practice, theory is no more pushing, right? Everything should stay exactly the same as it is. Well, that's a very convenient thing if you are a white person who's somewhat resentful of just
minority gains.
Yeah, minority gains, and claims of injustice towards minorities that challenge the status quo. You can just say, nope, everything should be as it is. Now, none of that means that every libertarian has these motivations or anything like that, right? But also, though, I do think it helps explain the pipeline you're talking about, because there are going to be people who come to it that for that reason, and some of those people are going to keep going past like they're not just going to be like, oh, okay, look, no, you can't don't tax me to benefit anybody in the inner cities, and just stick with the libertarian rationale. Some of them are going to just say fuck it and go full white nationalist.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But you do have that pipeline. And they love this argument, by the way, and I expected that Molyneux probably made something like this in his debate with you, where they said, like, well, we want libertarianism, but we must have libertarianism with people who believe in liberty, and minorities don't believe in liberty, and these strange people. Because that was the argument Jeff Garape made to argue why he was a libertarian, like in my debate with him.
Yeah, so there are Molyneux didn't say anything that was explicitly racist, when he was arguing with me. Whatever. His chat, was very concerned with the question of whether I look Jewish, but he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything racist. And he also, of course, since he was arguing with me and not with like a open borders libertarian, he didn't introduce the sort of arguments you're talking about. But I think I've seen him arguing with other libertarians about this stuff, where he will bring up that sort of argument that we can't let Mexicans in because they don't value liberty, right? So for the sake of liberty, we have to have this sprawling militarized police agency rounding people up and on the streets and in churches and at schools and putting them in concentration camps to protect liberty.
All for liberty, definitely nothing else. Definitely don't look into it further. So takeaways from the debate: where do you think you felt the strongest, and where do you think you felt the weakest?
Yeah, so I think that where I felt the strongest was on some of those historical questions that we're talking about, like particularly in his, on like the definition of socialism, question and in the history of that. Because I think I managed to anticipate that in the opening statement, and then he sort of said what I was trying to head off anyway, and I think I managed to push back against that fairly well, and in terms of sort of setting like what the debate is about, right? Since this is something that like I didn't want it to just be about the semantics, and I didn't want it to have all this sort of confusion about, well, he's okay with worker co-ops, if they arise within the market. And so, of course, my point about that is like, okay, but that's like a divine right monarchist saying they're okay with parliaments if the king convenes one. Like the question we're arguing about is whether, is whether we should just is not whether, what few co-ops manage to get off the ground within capitalism, should be allowed to do that, but whether we should not have capitalism at all, right? We should move towards a system where the dominant form of production would be socialized in one form or another. And I think I felt pretty good about all of that. I think probably where I felt the weakest was on some of his arguments okay, I think probably two places, right? So one was some of his arguments that people would that if people wanted to live in worker function within worker controlled economy, they would just start co-ops, and on the way that the voluntariness question came back up at the end, when he was sort of trotting out the you can have a cooperative within capitalism, you can't have a capitalist firm within socialism argument, and I think that so on the first question, he was really pushing this idea that all you'd have to do, right, which I think is kind of terrifyingly out of touch, with the economic realities. But all you'd have to do is just have your income for a few years, while you built up this.
Just save half your income.
Yeah, which given that how many people are living paycheck to paycheck, that we live in a system where even having insurance doesn't mean that you're not going to get some crazy surprise medical bill because you had to stop in and at a hospital that was out of network, or some awful thing like that where people didn't have to pay for their to pay for college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that where people didn't worry that basically, given that in reality we're living in a country where even lower middle class people spend a lot of their lives stressing about bills, then I think this halving your income thing is not very realistic. And I did point some of this out right in the debate. I think I was okay on that, but I think I could imagine a fair-minded observer watching that and feeling like I hadn't completely addressed his point, because after all, as he pointed out, there are people who engage in huge sacrifices to build businesses and all this stuff. There are people who sacrifice present consumption for while building up some career. So then why wouldn't people do this in order to build co-ops? And I think that what I should have said to more directly address that point is, even though honestly, even though rhetorically the thing that would have played the best would just have been hitting the point that I did make harder. But I think that in terms of addressing the actual substance of his argument, I think a point to make about that I didn't really make, but I should have, is that there's a prisoner's dilemma kind of quality to the problem here, by which I just mean that, okay, some people, right, lots of people aren't going to, and lots of people aren't realistically in any position to, right? But it is true that some people who start from positions that, broadly speaking, you could describe as working class, do manage to sacrifice a lot of consumption and save up money to try to start businesses. That does happen, clearly, right? There are, so, but the problem is that unless you're ideologically motivated, right, which of course some people are, and this is part of why we get what few co-ops we have, but unless you're ideologically motivated, if you are in a position to do that, to try to make the class leap, out of the working class, by scrimping and saving and making a bunch of sacrifices and whatever, if you're not ideologically motivated, why would you do all that for a co-op where you have to share power and you have to share, and sure, you'd be paid more than you would be in a if you were just working for somebody else, but not nearly as much as you would be as the actual owner of this new business. Like, of course, you'd shoot for the moon. You'd try to become a capitalist, rather than trying to be, a co-owner, within a cooperative, right?
Especially since you can more easily attract outside investors that way.
Exactly, right. Which does bring us back to a point that I did make, but I have, and then I think on the other weak point, So I mean, just to spell that out, right? It's like what I say. It's like a prisoner's dilemma kind of thing. That's like that. Like, okay, look, if you had a ton of people who are willing to just do that in order to start like big new cooperative businesses or whatever, that might even be the best thing for all of them. But but that does mean that each person is limiting their ambition somewhat, so it's like, even if it might be bad for everybody overall because they're less likely to succeed, that like if you're in that position in the first place, you're not ideologically motivated. Yeah, you'll obviously go for the better deal. Like if your reason for doing this is so you have a better life, then of course you go for having a much better life, and which you have obviously. Owners of businesses are better off than co-owners of cooperatives in the same way that kings are better off than citizens of democratic republics. So that seems pretty straightforward. Did not spell that out. I should have. And then on the other weak point, I think that with the okay, you can have a co-op within capitalism. You can't have capitalism within socialism. Point that I think it was probably a little bit too obvious that I was sort of thinking out loud about it as I was talking. Which I don't even know why that's the case. It's not like it's the first time like I've ever heard this. But that was. It almost goes back to what I was talking about with the Dave Smith debate. That was like a little too professory. That was like, well, here's what this guy says in this book, and but here are some other things you can think about it. And I think, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about how I should have handled that. But I will say that I think that the answer I gave at the end would, like, this is part of my answer, but I think if I just picked this and this would be the whole answer, that probably would have played a lot better. Which is just, look, there are lots of labor contracts that we prohibit, right? We prohibit making a contract to earn less than minimum wage. We prohibit we prohibit labor contracts where you have to accept where you have to put up with the boss's sexual advances at work, and so if you're going to say that that requiring that people have a vote and a voice in the workplace is an illegitimate, barrier to freedom of contract, then you should say the same thing about these. I'm pretty comfortable with all three of those. And then presumably, if that had been all I'd said, then maybe he would have just been, then maybe he would have actually had to address that. But as is, he managed to completely not address either of those, either the minimum wage analogy or the sexual harassment analogy. And I think it would have been nice if he had, because I'm pretty certain, right, given his anarcho-capitalist position, he would have just had to say, no, we shouldn't have those either. But I don't know. I remember Elizabeth Brunig saying on Chapo that half the point of a debate is to get the other guy to say what he actually thinks. This would be a good example of that.
That would have been a good one to see. ANCAPs, usually they really love to bite the bullet like that. Rothbard famously wrote his whole essay about how a truly free society will have a free market in children, and literally selling children, and that parents should be able to starve their child to death if they so chose. you know? And the thing is it's very easy for libertarians to fall into that because that's actually how they virtue signal to other libertarians, if they're right libertarians.
Yeah, but that's cool, right? I'm perfectly happy to have them do that because the signal it sends to anybody who has not drunk the Kool-Aid yet is, holy shit, really?
Yeah. And so that's one of the ways you can get an ANCAP into a position where they're going to alienate the vast majority of the audience is once you get them to do that, to say, you know, and I'm using this as a real example because this happened in an argument that I had where, yeah, the town rape might be terrible, but the town of Rape Town, where you agree to live by contract that you might get raped if you live in Rape Town, you know, that's perfectly fine and within the bounds of the NAP. And it's just like, oh man. So yeah, I mean that's how you can usually get them. My feelings on it, and I sent in 2 super chats, by the way, to help you out there.
Yeah. You mentioned the David Graeber response, which is basically which is a variation on the other thing that you could say, which I think is totally fine. I mean, I can have. You know, there are a couple of reasons that I didn't want to go with this as my whole answer, but the David Graeber thing, as I understand it, is just in a society without where nobody was being pressured by circumstances to, you know, like where you had, you know, you like material equality, then nobody would ever consider this anyway, so it'd just be a non-issue.
Pretty much. I mean, David Graeber, for those of you guys who don't know, he has a great response to this question. Now, this is from a libertarian socialist standpoint, so he's imagining a stateless society, which is a society without a military, without a police force, without prisons, anything like that. And you have 2 groups of idealists on a single island, and both of them set up their ideal societies. And one group sets up a society that everyone within is guaranteed at least the bare minimum for life and welcomes all comers. No borders. You come here, you automatically will receive food, shelter, and housing. There will be no rich people, but there will also be no poor people. And then the other society proceeds to set up a capitalist society where a small group rules and enjoys fabulous wealth and privileges, and a large group serves them and has no guarantees whatsoever. And Graeber's contention is that if you had this group on the island, the capitalist group would be without a workforce almost overnight. That everybody out there who was slated to be a night watchman and a tomato picker and to empty the bedpans, the capitalists that run this society would have to either enforce police and military to force the people to stay within that society, or they would have to start offering such a good deal to their workers that they might as well be living in the socialist paradise next door. But, you know, I don't think that would have worked directly for your argument because you were making a broader argument for socialism that specifically included state socialism.
Yeah, no, that's right. Now, there are people like, so David Schweikart, who I mentioned, you know, is the in his book After Capitalism, who does
Hang on, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt this, but I love this. Something tells me that consenting to live in Murder Town violates the categorical imperative.
Yeah, that seems right.
I would agree. So I'm sorry, Ben, I interrupted you.
No, I mean, so Schweikart does advocate essentially the model of feasible socialism that I'm talking about in his book After Capitalism, and he does still kind of take the Graeber position there. You know, he says that because he's addressing Robert Nozick's, basically Nozick's use of this sort of argument, and he says Nozick likes this phrase, capitalistic acts between consenting adults, and which is at least clever and probably the least creepy of the many libertarian analogies between sex and economics that they all seem so fond of, and Schweikart says, look, if we had this system going on around it, then sure, if you had like a few small capitalist firms, that really would be capitalistic acts between consenting adults, because nobody would feel economically pressured, to submit to this arrangement. again, I'm not like, I don't have a super strong position on this. I can see, I can see where Schweikart, and Graeber are coming from. I think, but I'm also, I mean, I'm enough of a statist to just say, look, I'm pretty comfortable with all of this stuff, right? With banning, labor contracts at, slave wages, with banning, labor contracts where you have to, where you're going to be subjected to the boss hitting on you at work, and I'm comfortable, I'm comfortable banning labor contracts, given reasonable limitations. Like I remember, like Vosh talked about this in the debate that he did with Molyneux, about if the somebody's, you have like a cooperative law firm, and somebody delivers pizza to the law firm, right? You don't need to make them a member of the co-op, like that they have. You can, you can have reasonable, limitations on,
someone has to work for the business for a certain period of time to get get voting status, for instance.
Stuff like that, right? That's totally fine, right? So maybe you'd still have like a little bit of wage labor around the edges, even so. But I am comfortable also just saying, like, within the limits of of reasonable common sense, exemptions like that, that like if you don't, if you like if you hire somebody to go, like, to do work for your YouTube channel for 3 hours a week or something, right? Like that's you don't have to, you and them, right, don't
suddenly
have to
own they don't suddenly own your YouTube channel.
yeah. But as long as the regulations were written in a reasonable way to have, for common sense exemptions like that, I'm pretty comfortable just banning it, and rather than like sweating about whether this means that this is involuntariness, I would prefer to make them explain, right, why they think that that economic voluntariness, is so important that we can't have sexual harassment laws and things like that.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally get you there. The other super chat that I sent in, by the way, also was, and I know why I didn't actually hear your response on this one. My kid, I was making dinner at the time while I was listening, and I think my kid had bumped his knee at that point, so I didn't hear your response, but I did hear David Friedman's response. But it had to do with the Great Leap Forward. Yeah. And so this is really fascinating, and I highly recommend everybody go and check out. Have you heard of this podcast, by the way? It's called Behind the Bastards. Oh, you should check it out. In fact, you should see if you can get Robert Evans on your show. He's the guy behind it. He is a former writer for Cracked.com that did like a lot of stuff, and then he went and covered the Euromaidan revolutions like on the ground, and also went and was embedded with the PKK YPG in Syria. Yeah, he does a great podcast that I think you'd love called Behind the Bastards. Dive into the worst people in the world. And one of the, I think it was a 2 or 3 part episode, was on Trofim Lysenko, the specific Soviet scientist. And he goes into like absolutely in detail, sourced everything on Lysenko and the effects that his science had on the Soviet famines. Specifically, Lysenko rejected the theory of evolution and instead kind of embraced like almost a Lamarckian thing. Yeah. And so, and his science was picked up.
Yeah, you can inherit acquired traits, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got, okay, I'm putting this up here because I want this to happen now. Yes, get Robert Evans on. That would be great. He's a really cool guy. Might have a machete. He's got a big joke with machetes. But yeah, anyway, so in this particular episode, it really goes into the history of it. And that's one of the things that blew my mind about the specifics of the kind of Soviet famines, because ANCAPs love to talk about communism and socialism as though it starves people. But even when he was bringing this up, and of course I couldn't reply without spending like $20, but the Great Leap Forward, like the famine, this is not the only factor, but it's a major one. The Chinese believed basically Lysenko made all these projections. They did not come true. because his theories did not work. And the Soviets then took those projections and said, no, this is true. We have this great harvest because of him, because it's a state secret. They don't want to admit that they went with the wrong guy. The Chinese saw it and were like, hey, let's do this. And they made projections based upon that like there was going to be this massive food boom. Oh man, how do we protect all this food? We'll have so much food we can't even store it. So they ate out like a year's worth of food, like they ate out like several years worth of stored food within about 6 months. And then went around and, for instance, killed all the sparrows to try to prevent, like to open their stores and try to prevent it from getting all this food that they thought was going to be in a giant boom. But of course, it was a lie, and there was no giant boom because these specific gardening or farming techniques just did not work. Now, it's not the only factor with regard to those famines, but it is a really, really big one. And it doesn't really show the weakness of socialist planning. What it shows is the weakness of, I suppose, authoritarianism. And, when you have every factor of a government controlled by just a few people who can then make the truth be whatever is convenient to them at a given time.
Yeah. So my response was basically the last part of what you just said, that like, I don't have any, that, and this is, I mean, it's kind of the same thing as what it said in the rebuttal about how I didn't want to get, even though I thought that some of the history was too simplistic, I don't want to waste a lot of time, defending a system that I don't advocate. I just wanted to clarify that, just wanted to put it out there that I think some of his history was an oversimplification, but but as far as my response, I think actually was one of the most succinct responses I gave to a question. I just said, like, this is the problem with the Great Leap Forward was the lack of democracy. That if Mao had been worried about the peasants voting him out of office, certainly would not have continued that policy, as long as it was. And this goes to one of many reasons that I like democracy, and I think it's important to have democracy and not just exit, which is which is his argument that it's fine if a workplace is dictatorship as long as you can quit. And I like democracy so much I want to extend it to the workplace.
I would agree, and I think that's a really good point to stick on, because again, ANCAPs really want to frame us as violent revolutionaries as much as possible. And I think even Dr. Friedman is not above such things, because you can see, like, they really want to frame a socialist as a violent revolutionary sociopath who just wants to steal stuff. And I think, by the way, you did a very good job of not coming off like a violent revolutionary sociopath, because you're Ben Burgis and you're adorable.
Well, that's good. I did, which although I suppose that would have been a real danger of coming off as a violent revolutionary sociopath, because I did frame the opening statement around the praising pirates. So I could definitely come around that way.
Hey, from me, that is a brilliant. I love that part of your opening statement, particularly because, and I'm sure your mind was there because you were listening to Flogging Molly, because it was. And Flogging Molly sings about pirates constantly. Queen Anne's Revenge, great song on that. Tobacco Island. I mean, also for those of you who are interested in anarchist history, pirates in a lot of ways were kind of proto-anarchists, and it is no coincidence that both pirates and anarchists both fly the black flag.
Just that those are, those are people, the way a lot of pirate ships, got started was by people, was by the crews of regular ships mutinying, and I think that
appropriating the means of flotation.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think that and I think there's a pretty close analogy, like at least the shape of how you feel about that, right? Not so much the piracy, but the mutinying is very much like the shape of the argument about between libertarians who think it's very important to protect the property rights of the existing owners of the means of production, and people and socialists, who think that expropriating the means is justified. And also, it's just fun. I mean, it let me spend like 3 minutes in the debate talking about pirates.
Absolutely. Friedman didn't inherit the soothing debate voice. Thank you so much for the super chat, Oliver. That's terrific. That will go to diapers for my son. Actually, I'm potty training my son now, so no diapers. So I'll spend it on booze. I think we've gone over the debate pretty solidly. So I figured we should plug our pluggables, because you and I have a thing coming up at the end of this week, in just a couple days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. So on Sunday, you and I and Rob Larson are going to finish going over Destiny's debate with Michael Albert, which got them. They got pretty like Destiny's fans got pretty excited about the first half, and they're all like obsessed with this like couple of minutes near the beginning. When you said that you weren't sure if this was what was going on or not, but doing something like ostentatiously eating pizza, during a stream can be a tactic to distract people, while your opponent is speaking. And despite the fact that you said you weren't sure whether that was what was going on, and despite the fact that in response I defended him and I said I don't think that's what's going on. I think he was just streaming for hours and hours.
He was just hungry.
And then when it came up later, I made what I thought was a self-effacing joke about how like I was always drinking during debates, and you could say the same thing about that. But nevertheless, he seems to. I haven't watched the stream that he did about our stream about him, but he must have said something about the pizza stuff, because there are like hundreds or thousands of comments from Destiny fans who are like who are obsessed with the pizza thing. So when we finish that on Sunday, we watch the remaining half of the debate, and
maybe we should eat a pizza while we do it.
Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking about that it would be funny to just like for one or better yet, like, or more of us to actually like order a pizza and like have it like just no explanation, don't talk about it, just like just start eating it on the stream.
Might be fun. I could use a pizza, to tell you the truth. And by the way, I did go on Destiny's show, or channel now. It's a show for me because I used to do the old radio stuff. It was a surprisingly fruitful discussion. His audience, I'm just going to assume they're all like teenagers and 12-year-olds and such, because the audience did not seem to have a pretty good time. But honestly, we kind of connected pretty well, and I felt like there was and I did explain the issue with the pizza and what we were doing. And he did agree he's going to debate me on Modern Day Debate in about 2 weeks, which is really exciting. I think we're going to do his moral system. Something to do with morality. We're still floating around. It's either probably going to be morality or there's determinism.
Okay. See, that's actually what I'd like to. That's actually what I'd like to debate him on at some point. Is the determinism stuff, since he has he kind of brought that up in a. Like it was just in passing, but in the Michael Albert debate, he brought up this idea that it doesn't make sense to say that people deserve to be compensated because of choices that they make, because nobody's ever really responsible.
Making a choice.
Right? Like you we're not in control of our choices in the right way for us to be responsible for them, which is a I mean, I think, I mean, I don't know what your position is on this, but I'm a compatibilist. I think that it's just I think that and I think there's like a really like, I don't know, maybe I've just like brainwashed myself about this over the years of thinking too much about it, and I've like lost touch with like normal people's intuitions about this, but like it seems pretty intuitive to me. Like if I, if we were going to meet for lunch and I just decided to stay home and play video games and I never called you or texted you to cancel, and you said, "What the hell, Ben? Why did you do that?" I said, "Well, I didn't have any choice." You said, "Oh, really? What happened?" And I said, "Well, my decision was caused by neurochemical processes, and those could be traced back to a chain of cause and effects that goes back to the beginning of the universe. I don't think that you would or should accept that as a responsibility absolving sense of I didn't have a choice, even if you agreed with all of it." I think.
Well, my argument would be, okay, and my neurochemical processes are not saying I'm pissed off at you. I have no control over that. Yeah. My position on it is it's I kind of reject both determinism and libertarian free will. I haven't read enough into compatibilism to decide if I agree with it. But like even before I really thought about it deeply philosophically, in just sort of a practical standpoint, I don't think it makes a difference one way or the other, because if we have free will, great, then free will isn't an illusion and we just do it. And if we don't have free will, we don't have the freedom to change our behavior based on new information. So we're still back where we started. It's not say what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could matter if we falsely form the belief that we don't, and then we do change our. I mean, it could be like. I mean, I don't know. I mean, even if we don't have like free will, which is like a slightly slippery term, but I mean, like it mostly seems to mean the kind of control that we'd have to be responsible, for our actions. Even if we don't have that kind of control, it could we could still change our behavior. It's just that the changes wouldn't be meaningfully under our control, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to out my argument on this, by the way, on this stream, because if we do determinism, I'm waiting to throw my fun trick punch.
But I would let me just plug here. So I think one of the best and clearest things that you can read about this is Ryan Lake's doctoral dissertation, which is available online. It's called No Fate But What We Make, so yeah, you can. So yeah, if you just Google "No Fate But What We Make" by Ryan Lake, that should come up right away in scholarly repository. And like he has a position that's based on it takes a lot from what like John Martin Fisher and other people have said, but I think Ryan does a really nice job in there of like starting you out by making a bunch of super basic distinctions at the beginning, and like it's a good like quick cheat to like catch up on like all the literature on this, because it's all summarized, in the first few chapters of that, and I find it.
Put this, I looked it up, so I've got the thing. I'm going to put it into the chat in case people are looking for it there. Yeah, this is. Yeah, and I probably will do his moral system or something similar on morality. I had some shower thoughts as to a good topic earlier today, and we'll see if they agree. But I was planning to do hard determinism versus libertarian free will with rationality rules. So if I wind up doing it with rationality rules, I'm sure you and Destiny, maybe you guys could do that on modern day debate.
Yeah, no, I would actually really like to. Oh, Oliver, what you're thinking of is the Frankfurt examples. He asked what the evil doctor thought experiment was called again. Yeah, that's a paper by Harry Frankfurt called Moral Responsibility and Alternate Possibilities, or it could be the other way around. It could be alternate possibilities and moral responsibilities, but it's those two and in the middle. And also just to loop back something else that was in the chat and respond to earlier. If you had a globally planned economy, then that would be then you wouldn't be getting those market signals from anywhere. But if you have nationally planned economies, even if every country is a nationally planned economy and they're just trading with each other, it is internally planned, then you'd still be getting market signals. So that book, while I'm recommended stuff, is The People's Republic of Walmart by Lee Phillips and Mikhail Rozworski, where it's a very thin book. It's very easy to read, but they go through a lot of ground. But that's the most famous argument in that book, that hey, Walmart has an internal economy bigger than Sweden, and that's a internally planned Soviet style command economy.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. Yeah. So next, on Sunday, we're doing the second part of the Destiny debate.
Yep.
If anybody does want to see the actual discussion I had with Destiny on my channel, it is the video right before this one, making fun of he put his out. And actually, the title was absolutely fire. The title and the image. He had a picture of himself as Dr. Manhattan, and it was revolutionary Buddhist confuses destiny with argument about infinite worth. And it was a long discussion. We talked for like 2 hours. So mine came out as anarchist writer has polite discussion with destiny.
I mean, his title for the original stream about our thing was leftist professor brings friends on to dunk on destiny, which is like, there's like, maybe if you put it all together, there's like 5 minutes of stuff in that stream that you could describe as dunking, which is like the pizza thing and the and like
making fun of his name.
Yeah, making fun of his name, which is like just a general thing that I do, that like if you, and I understand that there's like Twitch streamers, celebrity people all do this, but I always find it ridiculous, and I always make fun of it, that the way that they'll have like, instead of going by their name, they'll call themselves Destiny, Vosh, Endernax, whatever. Like just like you're a grown ass man. Just call yourself by your name.
Yeah, I agree. The handles are pretty silly at times. And by the way, if anyone is wondering from my handle, the comics that I reference in it, because he referenced Watchmen in his, I put his head on Destiny of the Endless from the Sandman series, and I stuck my head on his brother Destruction. Because I felt like that was just a nice way to respond to him responding to me talking about Alan Moore. So,
yeah,
level meta, and no one will get it except for me and you, because I just told you.
I read all of those. I read the whole run of Sandman, but I probably still wouldn't get it, because like when I was looking at it in the moment, I think, wait, what? Right? So. Yeah.
I should send you. I didn't know you read comics. If you did, I should send you the Snow White Zombie comics.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll send you some downloads for those.
But so we should also so the second half of the Destiny Michael Albert thing, that's just like the regular Sunday night debate breakdown live streams. We do them every Sunday. This is this is the first time one of the people in the debates has taken notice of it, but far as I know, but yeah, so that's at Sunday on my channel at 7:00 Eastern, and on Tuesday going to be back at Modern Debate to debate the death penalty. So it's me and Dylan Burns versus two people that I am not familiar with, so I do not remember their names. But we found them, right? I'd sort of put out the bat signal, say if they, I'd love to do one of these on the death penalty sometime, if only we could find somebody. And it took a little digging, which is actually almost hardening, that like there are relatively few people out there who are jazzed enough about the death penalty to to step up to debate it. But that's going on Tuesday, and yeah, I hope the the Destiny free will thing happens, or really whoever. I mean, I just don't know. I think like this is actually a topic I'm super interested in. I've written like a few articles about it. And it's something that I would love, since I like the idea of doing more sort of not immediately political philosophical debates like the one I did with Douglas Wilson. So I would love to do one on free will, but I don't think like that's why I got excited when Destiny mentioned that, because it's like, oh, maybe I could do one with him, because like I think I just don't know the people who'd be interested in doing that.
Yeah. Well, like talk to him about it. I know, or I can send him a message because now we're in contact. And yeah, I look forward to you doing it with partnering with Dylan Burns. Sounds really cool. Tell him to have me on his stream again, because I did enjoy myself the last time, despite the fact that he had to correct me on a misremembering of the number of votes that were cast for oh geez. My mind just blanked. Socialist presidential candidate, ran from prison.
Eugene V. Debs.
Yeah. I got confused over the percentage of the votes that Eugene V. Debs received, and he corrected me in the stream. But I did have fun the last time I was on there, and the episode that I was on his podcast is the one that the Proud Boy was distracting everybody by lifting water and pulling the pizza trick.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I should say, by the way, for people who are interested in Eugene Debs, that my friend Sean Goody, he's GUDE, he's an editor at Jacobin, and he's working on a book about Eugene Debs, and as he's sort of building up to the book, he's doing a Substack, and it's which is called the Debs Dispatch. So that's Sean Goody. So Sean GUDE.substack.com for anybody who's interested in that.
Absolutely. And so Ben, where can people find you?
So they could find me. The YouTube channel is, I tend to habitually say podcast, but I mean, most people access it, on YouTube, is Give Them an Argument. So it's youtube.com/Ben Burgis GTAA, but honestly, just do what everybody does and just Give Them an Argument into the search function. And for everything else, the Jacobin articles, the first book, the forthcoming book, all those links, the easiest thing to do is just to go to benburgis.com.
Yeah. Now, by the way, Ben, I noticed, because you and I were talking about possibly reviewing a death penalty debate. And then I also noticed immediately after we started talking about that, it must be in the zeitgeist, because Philosophy Tube put out a video on the death penalty. Have you seen that yet?
I have not seen the video yet. I saw that she had done that. I haven't seen the video.
Terrific. If I remember, it's pretty in depth. And what I would say is post haste, get Robert Evans on Give Them an Argument, because I think he'll be a very entertaining guest, and he does some incredible work. I'm going to send you a link to his podcast after this.
Cool.
All right. Okay. And so from me to all of you, this has been Insurrection with Brenton Lengel. Please keep making the argument for a saner, more compassionate world. And definitely check out Ben Burgis. He's doing some incredible stuff. And look forward to streaming with you on Sunday.
All right. Sounds good.